Today's news mashup are things that women are definitely going to be interested in. This one says women's work could soon be officially measured in government data. The Labor Department might soon start tracking an often overlooked part of the economy, women's work. Why it matters. Unpaid household labor like childcare, laundry, or home repairs is critical to the economy but isn't officially measured. State of play. Economists at Bard College released a report this week detailing how the government could measure this activity, which they call household production. The Labor Department commissioned the report in 2021, part of a major initiative aimed at coming up with a new component for one of its biggest reports on consumer expenditures. That survey examines how much Americans spend on everything from food to furniture to restaurant meals. It doesn't capture activities that don't cost money, but do cost time. Stunning stat. Women performed 78% of total value of unpaid household production in 2019, the researchers found. That number reflects the patriarchal allocation of household production responsibilities in our society, per the report. The big picture. It's important to track this kind of data to understand so many things, like Americans' true cost of living, explanation for the pay gap, and women's lower labor participation rates. The measure could be particularly crucial in refining measures of poverty. Flashback. When daycares and schools shut down during the height of the pandemic, Americans got a crash course on how critical unpaid labor is for keeping society humming. That experience nudged the Labor Department into action. Between the lines, this is a win for feminist economists. For years, their mainstream peers, mostly men, argued unpaid work wasn't an economic issue because it's a woman's moral duty born out of love. To measure household production, the Bard economists looked at data from the census and other places, mainly from 2019, on how Americans spend their time. They paired this with Labor Department numbers on how much certain work costs. For example, they looked at hours spent doing childcare and at wages for childcare workers and pre-K teachers. In a novel twist, the economists measured different kinds of childcare, active work like reading to a child, and supervisory work, keeping an eye on kids while you're doing the laundry, or something else. They also looked at unpaid work done by non-household members like grandparents or aunts. The aim is to convert the hours spent on tasks into measurable value. What's next? The Labor Department will evaluate the methodology used in this report with the goal of adding a household production measure to its expenditure data in 2025. Understand that women are being heard a little bit. What is going to happen, or what needs to happen, is that this is not women's work, that this needs to be adult people work, that our time, energy, and resources go to making these productive things that are done in the household equally or some kind of equitably spread amongst the adults in the household. So it's not just lumped on women and draining women's time and energy. Because while women may not be paid for this, this does require time and energy while saving the time and energy and stress level of the peen havers in the population. All right, let me know what you think about this one. I have never heard the word Vibecession, but this article is from Fortune. They say we analyzed 46 years of consumer sentiment data and found that today's Vibecession is just men starting to feel as bad about the economy as women historically have. Let's look at this a little bit deeper. Let's see what this Vibecession is. So this graph is the consumer sentiment. The blue line are men's vibes and the orangish looking color are women's vibe. So the orange line is consistently below the blue line. If you look in 2015, 2016, the men's line was well above the orange line. But now it looks like both lines are way down, but men is still above the women. Okay, and these are the consumer sentiments since 1978. So consumer sentiment. The article. Of the numerous economic trends filling column inches over the last few years, few have gained as much traction as Vibecession. Coined by Kyla Scanlon in July 2022, the term refers to the phenomenon of people feeling meh about the economy despite positive traditional measures of economic health. Much digital ink has been spilled on the topic. including many recent articles declaring the Vibecession has moved from hot in 2023 to not in 2024, as consumer sentiment has rebounded in recent months. But whose feelings have been driving the Vibecession in the first place? In a word, men's. Men have nearly always felt sunnier about the economy than women have. Our research shows that in 46 years of the University of Michigan's monthly survey of consumers, men have felt worse than women's about the economy just 15 times. While consumer sentiment has been down across the board since the pandemic began, our analysis also shows that a notable yet undiscussed aspect of the Vibecession conversation was a substantial narrowing of the gender gap between how men and women feel about the economy. The Vibecession was not just about everyone feeling bad about the economy, it was also about men finally feeling the same way as women do. It's not hard to imagine why women have been historically pessimistic about the economy. Women were only guaranteed financial autonomy via the right to open bank accounts or apply for credit or loans in 1974, shortly before the survey began. Through the latter half of the 20th century, women frequently faced unequal and hostile conditions on the job. The Supreme Court did not recognize sexual harassment as sex discrimination in the workplace until 1986. Within the lifetime of elder millennials, hey, women also continue to be forced to juggle work and caregiving, with only the national law explicitly focused on helping people balance these demands. The Family and Medical Leave Act have been on the books for just 3 decades. These legal and policy advances helped make the economy work better for women, and the vibes certainly reflect that. Women's consumer sentiment was 12.5% lower than men's in the 1980s. By the 2000s, the gap was 10%. Over the last 2 years, it stands at 5.7%. But the truth of the matter is that the economy still caters to the wants and needs of men. It's why almost half of all new businesses are started by women, but less than 2% of all venture capital dollars go to women-owned businesses. It's why billions have been sunk into all manner of AI startups, largely funded by men. But the childcare workforce has barely recovered from COVID-19. That's why women continue to be paid 78 cents for every dollar to a man, and the gaps for women of color are worse. It's 2024, we have robot vacuums, phones switch on at a look, and tourists in space. Yet we still live in a society that expects women to work full-time while also being a full-time caregivers to children and aging parents with minimal support. The persistent gender gap in vibes reflects this impossible bind. What if, instead of paying attention only when men are feeling as badly about the economy as women are, we focus on policies that lift women's vibes? For instance, the gap narrowed during the Vibecession because women's perception of the economy improved substantially more than men's in the early 2021. What were women reacting to? It's possible the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, with its expanded child tax care credit, child care rescue funding, and other key family supports, buoyed women's enthusiasm for future financial stability after so many were forced to make painful choices between caregiving and paid work during the first year of the pandemic. Though we can't say for sure, this seems plausible to us and others given the popularity of these programs, especially for women. Men and women's vibes moved more or less in tandem throughout 2022, the Vibecession era, and the overall vibes hit their nadir in June 2022. Also, the month of the highest inflation and the lowest level of consumer sentiment ever recorded for men. Gender vibes gap then grew again in 2023. What happened in 2023? The dissolution of much of the hastily constructed social safety net assembled during the early days of the pandemic, and workplaces increasingly returning to normal, a normal that never really worked well for women. And even though we can't parse the vibes by race or disability status, experience from other analyses suggest women of color and disabled women are struggling mightily to stay afloat in a system and country that were built not to include them twice and thrice over. To be clear, focusing on consumer sentiment has been a much needed shift in how we think and talk about the economy. But turning away from this conversation as the gender vibes gap has resurged is concerning. While many excellent journalists have written about mom struggles, finding childcare, or the mental load of balancing work and family responsibilities, those discussions are rarely front and center in the economic conversation. Women are more than half of the population, almost half of the workforce, and drive consumer spending. But how they feel about the economy hasn't been a central part of the conversation. That has to change. If y'all don't understand how important putting these two news articles together is clutch, because women are the driving forces for things. Now, as more and more women decide to opt out of childcare, out of having babies or out of marriage, that will impact the economy. And folks are really starting to understand that now, especially as women become homeowners, decide not to live with men. Men will have to figure out how to do many of these things for themselves. The shift is coming. The shift is here and it's starting to be quantified. It's not just vibes. It is actually being put into data. Some people don't understand things until it is tracked by numbers. And that is what is exciting for me because I really do enjoy following the numbers. Let me know what you think about this one. Don't forget to. I am totally amused that this topic has made it to NBC News. Some dating coaches online are pushing women to seek more traditional gender roles. Dating coach Carla Elia tells women not to go out with a man who is nice or who treats you right, but one who can afford them. Her advice, while highly criticized by some who have seen her videos, has dominated a pocket of the internet that depicts heterosexual romance as a deal between men and women, in so much as women are receivers and men are providers. The 24-year-old, 24, wow, the 24-year-old is part of a community of women who have gained popularity and notoriety online for their espousal of what can feel like antiquated dating guidance. I see the dating scene and relationships as a business because it is, said Elia, who has more than 1 million followers on TikTok. A lot of people don't like to admit that relationships are transactional, but they are. Social media has become a hub for dating advice as people have normalized confiding in internet strangers over everything from first date horror stories to latest relationship tests. It's given rise to its own niches of content from self-proclaimed dating experts, building followings around the advice they preach. Some of the most popular of these advice gurus are encouraging women to turn dating into a game of strategy to win. Attract a man who's willing to pay all the bills, spoil his partner with gifts, and fund a lavish lifestyle. So I'm not going to post her video, but it's titled Only Date Men That Can Afford You. A man would never ask his dream girl to split a bill. Some of these influencers have said in their videos, women should see themselves as a prize, something not easily won over. Others said in videos, and self-described financial advisor Shira Seven, the fact that Shira Seven made it to NBC News is big. Shira Seven, who's built a loyal following teaching women how to pursue wealthy men, has said a man who wants a woman to bring something to the table can go to IHOP instead. Many within this category of dating influencers also sell coaching sessions, courses, and ebooks, all touting tactics to help their audience successfully attract a man with a provider mindset. Cecile Simmons, a researcher studying what she described as anti-feminist influencers, said she doesn't see the rise of this type of content as surprising. She said that it may be a reaction to ideas commonly shared in the manosphere, a network of online spaces where men often talk about women in terms of sexual marketplace and trade tips on how to become a high value man or alpha male. It is wild that this has made it to NBC. In these really misogynistic communities, there's this idea that all women want is a rich guy. The incels in all these communities hate women for that, Simmons said. So then you have some women reclaiming that, saying, yeah, I want a rich guy and I'm entitled to that, a bit like the manosphere guys would say they're entitled to an attractive woman. Still, some who promote the dynamic said it works because women inherently contribute different things to a relationship than their male counterparts. I don't believe men and women are equal apart from the fact that we should have basic human rights and that we should be able to get paid the same wage, work in the same position, said Abigail Swee, 30 who shares what she described as elevated dating advice on Instagram. But apart from that, we are really different biologically, physically, and emotionally. So the caption on her says, point of view, you realized if a gold digger is a thing, then that only date women who fit their beauty standard should be called a beauty digger. Sui, one of the newer creators in the space, has told her followers that men are natural born hunters who want to conquer them. That's why women shouldn't be too easy to chase, she said, or accept low effort dates like getting coffee. The movement has developed its own shorthand meant to quickly convey its values, like the princess treatment is what women should demand of men, while a high value woman is well groomed and self assured. Feminine energy, being nurturing, wanting a slower pace of life is a must, while masculine energy, such as splitting the bill, is to be avoided. Those interviewed for the article said much of their dating outlook is shaped by an exasperation with endless hustle culture and ever rising cost of living. Many said they are tired of the kind of lean in girl boss feminism pushed to millennials in the past decade, which they said has led to nothing but burnout and wage stagnation. So that's women's fault and feminism's fault, the wage stagnation and burnout. Got it. It's going to sound like putting people into gender roles, but whatever. I think that at least the women I help, we're waking up and seeing that we have been in survival mode this entire time. Elia said, our nervous system is wrecked from having to do so many things at once, just trying to survive and pay all our own bills. While some women, such as those in the dating advice forums like Red Pill Women on Reddit, genuinely share ideas that parallel those in the manosphere, others have said online they just want to be provided for without the strings of traditional conservative values. It's a movement that echoes the traditional wife or tradwife, as the internet has coined it, lifestyles that have drawn renewed intrigue and criticism in recent years. Videos of self described tradwives typically depict these women as committing themselves to housework and child rearing while being subservient to their husbands. But some researchers said women seeking provider men are distinctly different from tradwives, who often pride themselves on their frugality and self sufficiency. Instead, they have no qualms about pursuing luxury living or using their partner's financial support to free up their own time and money without the stress of the daily grind. You could position it almost on a continuum in the sense that you've got a super consumerist, stay at home girlfriend types, said Sophia Sykes, a researcher who studies how social media propels online subcultures. And then you've got your apron wearing traditional 1950s type tradwives. I still need to get me an apron. Though many of these dating coaches push the idea of securing financial stability through marriage, some also said they're careful not to fully be reliant on a man just because he's covering all the bills. Instead, they said it is important for women to either build a separate income stream in their spare time or to save money and invest their allowances. I think a major misconception is that people think, oh, if you're getting provided for, that means you're financially dependent on a man. That is so untrue, Sweet said. Being provided for means you have more resources because you get to keep all your money and you can invest them. That's actually making you financially more independent if anything happens. Simmons, the researcher, said these influencers are selling a lifestyle that offers a tantalizing alternative for women aiming to escape a life of dead end 9 to 5s, especially what they see as a bleak economic climate. And many are tapping into their resentment against a brand of feminism that hasn't felt inclusive, that simply hasn't fulfilled its promise. But I'm not sure that turning yourself into a project to seduce a man is empowering at all, Simmons said. It just provides a kind of quick and easy solution to a few women, but it doesn't liberate women as a whole. Very, very interesting that it has made it here. But y'all know I have been talking about this whole trad wife phenomenon and to proceed with caution. That's all I have said. Have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, elemental P, all of that, because you need to be able to survive and thrive regardless of marital status. So I'm going to leave it there. If you made it this far, go ahead and hit subscribe if you haven't yet. And don't forget to like, comment, and share. Share what you think on this.